Get ready for Netflix's gripping new medical drama, Pulse. Set in a cutting-edge Miami trauma center, third-year resident Dr. Danny Sims is unexpectedly thrust into a promotion when beloved chief resident Dr. Xander Phillips gets suspended. Then, with the emotional and physical stakes at their highest, a storm will push the hospital and its residents to their limits. Witness how life can change in a heartbeat when you're operating under pressure. Watch Pulse, only on Netflix.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-8444-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
It's really cool.
Bonjour, hello, and welcome to the ROGBowl Rugby Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things French rugby. Top 14, Pro de Deux, National, bars, restaurants, fans, music, everything else in lovely towns and cities and everything else in between. And particularly this weekend, the Champions Cup and Challenge Cup action, which was a festival of rugby, which we are going to come onto throughout this podcast. I am joined, don't worry, this is Rob. I am joined dialing in from Montenegro. Richard Croney, how are you?
Very well, Rob. Yeah, I'm enjoying a bit of Balkans. Is it counts Balkans? I don't know. Former Yugoslavian sunshine. It's it's beautiful. It's sunny, bit windy, but otherwise it's all good. What's news from South London?
It's still glorious weather. It was quite cold yesterday, but it's still lovely weather, and it's forecast set fair for the rest of the week. And it was certainly set fair over the weekend. Did you manage to catch much of the European Rugby Carnival that we had over the weekend?
I saw bits and pieces. I saw a couple of the games on Saturday. That's kind of the extent of it. I saw a few highlights here and there. Was out in the London sun for the Toulon Saracens game and was slightly aghast at some of the notifications that were popping up on my phone. Sunday, I saw very, very little. Was too busy fearing for my life as our plane struggled to land in slightly aggressive conditions to screaming passengers. And
really
felt like yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
It was a bit of a cheapo Airways landing, but we're here to tell the tale. So
excellent stuff. Your sound is sounding all right, possibly better than it has done for previous weeks recently, and almost certainly better than the sound for Ben Kaiser and Simon Zebo for the first part of that first half in the La Rochelle v Munster game. Do you want to start there? Because it feels, I was thinking about it, like, were there any upsets? And I think that is probably because I think I predicted all the Champions Cup games. I kind of predicted, well, all the French ones anyway, the winners correctly, because I thought it might be Munster, but that was the only one we were split on, wasn't it? That was as kind of close as we got to an upset, I guess. And would you call it an upset? Let's start there.
I think I still would. I think regardless of how poor La Rochelle's form had been, they had shown a little bit more in Europe. I think the stakes are so high that you expected a bit more of a response. They were pretty much at full noise, had a bit of time to prepare. And I think after the first 15 to 20 minutes, if you'd said Munster would win that game, then yeah, it was an upset. Obviously, we've spoken a bit about how poor they've been for a little while now, but they seem to, as I said at the start of that game, look like they've kind of overcome it. And I don't follow the URC that much, I'll be honest with you, but I don't think Munster are quite the powerhouse they were. This wasn't Leinster going away as they did in the group stages and winning by 3. So I think, yeah, probably does qualify as a bit of an upset.
Yeah, I think Ryle Nugent said right at the end of the game that kind of Munster consistently or continue to be the sum better than the sum of their parts, which has always been the case. Like, it kind of felt right at the end, like it's like this is vintage Munster. Like, it's kind of how many times have we seen them do that down the years? Like, couple of star names, but a lot of work, man, and just grind it out somehow. Yeah, I think you're dead right about that first 15, 20 minutes. It kind of felt like they were on in the same way that they were on in that Bath game, which is kind of their kind of standout performance still, I think, this season is Bath away. They haven't really touched those heights, certainly not across a full 80 in any other game this season. Even the kind of Bristol game that they won quite convincingly the next week, they weren't fantastic. And they looked electric. It's weird now because I was trying to think, like, what was the USP, I guess, or the attacking flair of La Rochelle when they were good? Like, what was their, from memory, for me, it wasn't like, there weren't like loads of amazing shapes. It was just big men getting over the gain line and offloading to people flooding through and just consistently getting over the gain line and being able to kind of use the individual talents or skills or pace or power of their squad. It wasn't, because there's been a lot of, their phase play has been rubbish generally this season. I thought but like they kind of, their first phase stuff in that first 15, 20 minutes, they kind of ran the same play a few times with Aldry off the base, and they looked like it was really working. It looked really organised and really in sync. It was something that we haven't, I don't know if we've ever seen that from them. That's kind of my point. Like, are we expecting too much to kind of see like a gloriously meticulous attacking play, or is it just, it's always been big blokes getting over the gain line?
I think a little bit of both. What I was going to say on that was it was not particularly intricate, but it was really effective, and it was very precise, and it was, I think it was a little bit more. You had I'd say obviously all of their big units flooding through, but there was quite a lot of, like Antonio out back and Skelton flipping the ball on and that sort of thing. And as simple as it was incredibly effective, and it was, I guess, testament to some pretty good like last-ditch defence that Munster didn't get totally blown away in that first 20. But that was clearly La Rochelle had a plan, and it was working beautifully. They had that as soon as the game kicked off. It was Kerr Barlow who scored. It was like 40 seconds, and it was ruled out for like a stud-in touch. And I was instantly like, this is going to be a cakewalk. Like, they are on it. Like, they look absolutely, they look like they're here to really do business. And I don't know if maybe we're going to come on to this, but I think, we spoke a bit before about the pressure on O'Gara, and obviously there's a bit of a narrative around this game with the Munster connection. But I think...
what was that? Sorry, I don't think I picked that up during the week.
The ROGBowl. I just think there's points where you cannot look to a coach. And I think La Rochelle showed in the first 20 minutes here that they had all the ingredients and game plan and personnel to win this game.
Yeah.
And it's fundamentally big individual errors at key points that have absolutely killed them.
I think that was kind of what I was going to come on to, because where do you see, how did they lose it? Did Munster win it, or did La Rochelle lose it? And how did La Rochelle lose it?
I think it would be really unfair on Munster to say it was purely La Rochelle losing it.
Yeah.
Because I think some of their defence was exceptional. I think a couple of the tries were brilliantly taken, and they played some really good attacking rugby. The Casey try from the Thackett Abrahams break is just beautiful.
Yeah.
But I think it's an 80-minute game, but it all for me comes down to that 5-minute period where Teddy Thomas tries to be clever and run it in under the post with the line at its mercy. that's 5-7 points spurned straight away. You've then got, I can't remember the exact order, but you then have the Lades yellow card, which I think follows the charge down by Gavin Coombs on High West, which is just like High West has been pretty good, isn't he? And he's kind of taken the 10 jersey back off Astor, but he's got all the time in the world to kick that ball clear. And it's not even like a fingertip charge down. So you've got, I don't know, whatever you call it, a 14-point swing and a man in the bin. And it's hard to look past that as the pivotal thing. But I don't think it's not like the France-England game in the Six Nations where 5 blokes have dropped the ball with the line at their mercy, whatever it is. It's not that level of losing it. I think Munster were pretty good value.
I think it was kind of like it was a bit of a momentum game, if that makes sense. Like it kind of when the momentum went back and forth, and I think La Rochelle needed the momentum in their favour with the atmosphere sounded absolutely unbelievable. Like it was kind of just watching it on TV, like hair standing up, which is a bit of a cliche, but it's actually a thing. Like, and like we saw it with that penalty try, or was it a penalty try, or the kind of one where the maul try near the end where they kind of got back into it, and then the balloon just gets popped by that brilliant drop goal from Crowley, and it kind of there was kind of just those things where like the momentum, La Rochelle do something and it's like they could really run away with it here, and then Munster just kind of managed to stop the momentum and swing it back their way. The Teddy Thomas butchering, I am struggling to think of a more obvious butchering. You've got one of the top 10 quickest players in the tournament, I'd say, probably still, with 12 metres of space, 10 to 12 metres of space, 5 metres out, and the outside defender is a tight head prop. It's baffling. The more you watch it, the more you're like, what is he doing? For anyone that hasn't seen it, well, I've kind of described it there. It is, try and find it. Or I saw a photo of it before I watched this kind of after the event. Put a
great photo up.
It's just ridiculous.
You're right. It's a wild butchering. But Teddy Thomas he's had an interesting season, and
he looked
there are a couple of moments
dynamite for the rest of the game.
He was brilliant. He was brilliant in the lead up to it as well. He was like busting tackles. He was running sideways and finding gaps. He got away with. Do you remember his? I think it was a yellow against Clermont that then got upgraded like a 4-week ban. He did exactly the same thing in the first half, but just missed, and I think kind of ended up like bumping shoulders. But there was a bit of I don't know. I think there was a bit of wildness about the way, like he was clearly pumped, and for the most part that manifested itself in some fantastic attacking running. But I just think he was like on one, and it was horrible. It was the way he gets wrapped up as well. He's like, it's not even, it's like not even close.
To be fair to Munster, and it was a point I think they made post-match, the kind of work rate that you always see as cliches, isn't it? But like you kind of always see from Munster, like it wasn't just Ollie Jaeger they had to beat by stepping back inside. Like he steps back inside and suddenly there are 5 other men that he's trying to beat. I think that's probably not helped. The thing I found interesting about that was obviously fresh from his, as you so eloquently put, fresh from caddying at Augusta in his green cap and white shirt. Simon Zebo said, he was kind of like, I don't know if it was a brain fade or arrogant. And I kind of thought, like,
I think probably the latter.
Hang on, they played together at Racing. That's clearly something that stuck. Like, you know, when you like kind of think about guys that we've played cricket with, and you kind of think like back, and you kind of have like one abiding memory of someone, and that probably sticks with you. And it's kind of like that must be like how he remembers Teddy Thomas, as just a bit arrogant, which would explain like large chunks of his career, I guess, and kind of why he kind of is so up and down, because maybe he just pisses people off, or the arrogance becomes hubris and he kind of fades off, or
perhaps.
But
he probably was their best attacking weapon, wasn't he? The only other thing on this I was going to say, which just echoes your point around the atmosphere, after that penalty, was it the penalty try? Maybe not, but after the final La Rochelle score, when there were, I think, 2 minutes on the clock. Oh no, after Bosmaran try, sorry, from the Hastoy kick.
After Antoine Hastoy became Johnny Wilkinson for Dan Carter.
He was brilliant, wasn't he?
the length of his kicking. I don't seem to remember him like obviously being a big kicker, but some of the length on his kicking was brilliant. And then to delicate chip as well.
Completely brought them back in the game. But and it's sort of slightly got a pin put in it by the TMO wanting to have a look at the grounding. But the kind of the roar as that restart was about to happen from all parts of the ground was, it was very much that halcyon days of Heineken Cup.
Yeah.
Test match intensity, if not necessarily quality. It was class.
There's a high shot on Jules Favre, I think, in the second phase from that both Kaiser and Zebo kind of like that, ooh, and it doesn't get checked at all. And they're like, and Royal Nugent's like, they'll come back and look at that. They don't even show a replay at any point. So I actually rewound it and looked at it, and it's like makes you wince. Like, it's a high shot. He's a little bit low, but there's a high shot kind of shoulder to head on Jules Favre that, given some of the stuff that got called back by the TMO, how it doesn't. And, they do get the penalty anyway in basically the same area in their own 22 or just on their own 22. But if they are then defending with 14 as opposed to, or 14 on 14, with 14 rather than 15, who knows? But the recording also overran into the next program, which I think shows how much the TMO was involved. I guess just to wrap up on that is now La Rochelle's Champions Cup done. What next for La Rochelle? What next for Rog? Any takeaways from this game? Positives, negatives? Hammer anyone you like? Praise anyone you like?
I don't think there's. I think collectively they still showed in this game that in parts they've got everything they need, if not to compete with Bordeaux, Toulouse. That they should be in the barrage, even if they're going to miss it this year. I think it, for me, put in under a bit of a magnifying glass. Just a lot of it has been some really poor individual errors at key points. I think this was a real demonstration of that. And I think they're crying out for some new blood, which, for the sounds of things, they've got arguably the three most exciting signings potentially coming for next year in Legarec, Niniashvili, and I think directly after the game, a bit of a
shuffled out to paper over the cracks.
Is the rumour, isn't it?
Still rumours. What happened to the Damien McKenzie stuff?
So I think he's re-signed, isn't he? With
is
he at the Chiefs?
Yeah.
I think that's done. So I think that they need that new blood. I think with hindsight, you mentioned last week, this should have been a bit of a last dance season. With hindsight, they probably got it a bit wrong with some of their re-signings and not fading in some of the newer blood a bit. But I don't think they're quite as in the dumps. And I think for that matter, I don't think bidding off Al Rog would do them too many favours, unless they get relegated this year, in which case.
They are only 4 points off the barrage. I'm kind of partly on the Rog out campaign because I'd quite like him to rock up as the Leicester coach. So. But and that would be awesome for Leicester. I think he'd be the perfect Leicester coach. But yeah, I think this showed that A, they're willing to still play for him, and B, he can set them up. I thought some of the changes, the bench substitutions were weird. Like, he kind of randomly took off West for Haddad and moved Jego out to centre. Like, the backs changed about 3 or 4 times in the space of 5 minutes. And it's kind of like, no wonder you haven't got any attacking cohesion if you're just, taking Sateni off. Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was kind of betrayed his desperation to kind of do something like that. But I think they did show that there's a bit of a game plan there that they can build on, and that they can still play for him and they can still play for each other. They are only 4 points off the barrage. They should be getting that, really, if you look at the other teams in for it. But they ultimately have not won a game since the first weekend of January. So who knows? Yeah. The other team, ironically, in the race for the barrage, who are now quarter-finalists for the first time in a very, very long time, your boys, Castres Olympique, in an absolute belter at the Stade Pierre Fabre.
Amazing. Was this the most cast knockout game of all time? We said before that Castres had this astonishing way to have one of the best home records in the league, but insist on only ever winning by a margin of a maximum of 5 points. And their discipline, particularly at home, at points this year has been like actually the La Rochelle game back in November or whatever it was a great example of that. I think they did their best to let La Rochelle back in off the back of like 3 back-to-back yellow cards. And it felt like Segure's red in this, which was totally needless hit on Albanos.
Go on. Sorry, finish your point.
Just, you're like, this is it. It's finally, it's going to be one step too far. Like, this is the one it cooks him. And lo and behold, 39-37, carnage in the tarn. What amazing.
On that red card, am I going mental, or is that like the softest of softest red card? Like, he barely touches him. I'm not sure he even does touch him.
He does. I think he does touch him. He's
down like a sack of spuds. He properly he hits the deck.
It looked like he's actually been sparked out, but he hasn't been.
Yeah, he's literally they've touched shoulders.
But it's so needless.
Yeah.
It's just so stupid. But there we go.
I guess so. What do you want to kind of say about the Castres game? I guess it was brilliant entertainment. Who were the people that impressed you for Castres? I thought for Benetton, I thought Mendy was brilliant. I thought Zuliani was fantastic. He's kind of certainly validated kind of why he's overtaken Lamaro both for Italy and now Benetton. But what were the storylines that interested you in this one? What did you learn? What do you want to take away from it?
Well, I think the key Ben for me in this. So Van den Berg got man the match, and he was just your typical kind of French 5, nailing people, getting in fights, but did everything he needed to, including packing down at 8 at the end, and was pretty handy off the back of the scrum. So he was great. I think ultimately Castres bench told, and the 2 guys who were key to that were Goodhue, who
I think that's his best game. I think that's the best game I've seen him play for Castres.
He was amazing because that team was like, they were cooked. They were complete. Like, I mean, everyone was cooked. It looked boiling, and they're down to 14 men. He gave them go forward from pretty much everywhere. But the key man, and it seemed kind of predestined in the end, but Fernandez off the bench for, obviously Arata, we said last week, has been brilliant in that starting role, but Fernandez brought so much accuracy, so much pace, and was thoroughly deserving of the winning score. I thought he was probably the biggest difference maker actually, that Castres team.
Well, you've missed who I thought was the best player off the bench for Castres. The man, the myth, the legend continues. Leone Nakarawa was just an absolute joke. It's like, what he is capable of doing on a rugby pitch is just freakish. He is amazing. Like, he's just a joy to watch. Kind of someone that big and now also quite old. Like, just how he gets his hands free so easily is phenomenal. And he also, it's not just that. Like, there's a reason he's playing second row and not 8 or 12. Like, he's an amazing second row in his own right in terms of bashing people, his own carrying physically, his line out work, his maul work is exceptional. It was, like, I feel like with some Fijians, there's kind of like, because Fiji never have like they've never had like the World Cup win, or, they're never quite like the main man. There's never like a Fijian captain of a European Cup side. Like, some of the greats of the game are Fijian. I feel like sometimes they're almost too easily forgotten because there's not some of the international or wider recognition. But like, some players,
he's one of the best second rows of
this century,
this generation.
Yeah. He's unbelievable. Like, what a joy to watch. What a joy to watch. I thought he could have easily been man of the match. I thought, generally, just to blow our own trumpet, I thought we got some of the picks for who to watch out for, key men, pretty much nailed on this weekend. And, we called out Bosmoran as someone to watch. He got a try. He was a little bit sparky. Booger, it was quite quiet, actually. But we had Arata in this game, who was pretty key. You called out Shabuni, who I thought was really good. Stepped in at 10 as well for a bit.
Yeah, he's good.
At the end, he looked really, really good. Really exciting player, but also quite... Is he the lad that came back from the sevens?
No, that's that's going to really annoy me, but no, it's not.
Yeah.
Zegdar.
Yeah, that's it. And also, yeah, I think I mentioned Van der Berg, but also we kind of also mentioned Papali'i, who had a bit of a mixed bag, but when he was good, he was very good.
Yeah, I feel like we can't let this game go without a bit of a shout out to one of our loyal followers, fans on Instagram, the great man Jolly Hactor, who turns out I think met the Spritz and Scrums crew.
Yeah.
And not only did he meet them, but he'd made some personalised stash, which included the Rosbiff Rugby logo.
And the Spritz and Scrums logo, which is quite flair.
What a man! Looked like a bloody good trip as well.
Yeah, definitely did. And Spritz and Scrums looked like they had a wicked time at Stade Pierre Fabre. And actually, like, it would have been impossible not to. The atmosphere was absolutely rocking. I think I saw some attendance stats, and most of the French crowds were full capacity. And that place at full capacity and the sunshine and that sort of game, like, what a treat to have gone to that game for those guys. Yeah, no wonder you can I think they said that they said it was one of the best weekends they've done as Benetton fans, which is easy to believe because that was just one of the. It's never going to be remembered, I don't think, unless Castres go on and win the Champions Cup. I don't think it's because this weekend we had all sorts of other games, but it was in its own right just an absolute belt. Like, it was a classic game. That is one of the best Champions Cup games of
it'll be in 10 years' time. There'll be an article and it'll be like the best Champions Cup games you never saw.
Yeah,
and that'll be one of them.
Yeah, I thought. And how do you rate Castres' chances going into next week? I think they're obviously going to have two new centres, I'd imagine. Kathangi looked like he was in quite a lot of pain. I don't think that's an issue because they're going to get good. Like, if he plays like that again, it's quite easy to forget. Like, I think he only has like 18 caps, which I found amazing. But there was a period of time where he was the main man in that midfield for New Zealand, which is, I think the injuries kind of got to him and he kind of faded out. But there was kind of like a period where I was like, Goodhue and who else is going to pair him for the All Blacks, which is, he was so good and quite nice to see him play that well and play like the kind of player I remember a bit more, rather than just a bloke getting absolutely belted every week, which is what I've seen so far. The centres, they should be all right. I think they won't make too many changes. They go away to Northampton, who they went to in the pool stages with a very changed up side under Davidson, Ron Sidorni. Whereas, who knows, the change up sides for Castres these days doesn't really matter. Oh, I thought Remy Baget was brilliant. I thought he should have actually possibly won man of the match. I thought he was very good. Yeah, I think I remember Johnny Beattie saying, like, when he rocked up at Bayonne, Remy Baget, they called him the spy because they were like, how is this guy a professional rugby player? Like, he just doesn't look like a rugby player. There's no like obvious like physical or speed or like, it's not, he just looks awkward. And yet, like, his top trump, it would all be very middling, you'd think. Yeah. It wouldn't be like speed 100, but he's class. But he's just, I think he's not played for France. He was in the squad, but he just doesn't seem like an international winger. He seems destined to be like a player that's brilliant club stalwart and a really kind of fun club player to watch. But yeah, how do you rate their chances next weekend? I would have Northampton as pretty strong favourites. Yeah. It feels like a bit of a clash of styles, doesn't it? In that Northampton's pack has been a bit spindly at times this year. And I think before it all kind of fell apart for Clermont, there were a couple of signs of that in the Friday night game. Yeah, Clermont's pack is so good, and when it's on, it's so good. So I think they've got the ingredients to cause them trouble there. I do think if Northampton get it right, Castres away from home might struggle with the pace they can play at, would be my concern. Plus, you've just got Castres going away, which has typically been a bit of a disaster. We will see. Castres by 1. Yeah, go on. I think you mentioned it there, playing with pace. I know we've not got much of your time left. There's obviously going to be a lot of conjecture, and there has been conjecture about the number of points and styles of play and stuff like that this weekend. And it's like the cliches, defence optional. But I think for me, certainly that Toulon game, Toulon v Sarries, like some of the Sarries stuff where it was like, Toulon are defence optional for Toulon, or their defence has been crap. It's like, well, has it? Like, how the hell do you defend some of that? Like, some of the pace of play that we've seen this weekend, and we saw it from Sale against Toulouse in parts, just the getting the ball away. If you get a player over the gain line and you've got a scrum half there that can get the ball away to a good fly half, who's then got carriers outside him that can also get over the gain line, how do you defend someone like Theo Dan, who's an explosive player, like strong, powerful, on the front foot, and able to get an offload away? Like, you kind of, you can be defence optional or not optional or mandatory. It's pretty hard to keep up with some of the skill we're seeing at the moment. I think it's kind of a bit of a negative way to say, oh, the game's, not what it used to be, et cetera, et cetera. I think, I think like, I think it has been this weekend an absolute festival of attacking rugby, a carnival of attacking rugby. The sun was out everywhere.
Yeah.
Everyone was up for it, even the sides that supposedly sent their shags, and like Saracens, who is actually, turns out their shags are, still international players, basically. It's kind of very easy to forget how much depth they still have and how much quality. But yeah, I think it was just brilliant attacking rugby all round. I don't think you could say defence was crap anywhere, really. Like, there was a few games where there was more errors than others, like the, Castres and Benetton are both those sorts of teams that have got an error in them. La Rochelle and Munster weren't perfect. But yeah, before you go, anything else you want to touch on?
No, I think it's a really interesting point, though. I think there's, in search of a headline, there's been a lot, isn't there, about the lack of seriousness of particularly like the English game and these high scores. But I mean, this weekend, like, as you say, it was perfect attacking rugby conditions with teams that are increasingly, the way they set up is loaded in favour of out and out attack, basically. Yeah. And I think the big shift we're seeing as well is that previously that, or maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a bit of a broad brush, but that kind of all-out attacking mindset was considered the preserve of a Fiji, a Harlequins when they weren't that great. Yeah. And it's kind of, a way of a team who are okay punching up a bit, but it's not been that successful. Whereas actually we're now seeing that, people are saying that this Toulouse team, some pretty storied commentators on the game, the greatest club side they've ever seen, and they're probably the best attacking team in the world. So I think, like, ultimately, I don't know. I think some of the reactions are a bit knee-jerk and a bit dull, and sometimes just sit back and enjoy it would be my closing thought, Rob.
Excellent stuff. And you are back next week to discuss in more detail the best weekend of the rugby calendar, the quarterfinals.
100%. Back and ready.
Clean sweep for the French sides and Leinster in the final, in the semi-finals.
I think unfortunately it'll be Northampton Leinster again, won't it? But Toulon to lose. Wow, what a beauty that would be.
Yeah, excellent stuff. Right, thank you, Richard. Enjoy the rest of your holiday.
It's been my pleasure. Take it easy, Rob. Au revoir.
Well, thank you very much to Richard there for dialing in from his holiday, which is the least he can do, to be honest, because for the second year in a row, he has gone on holiday between the last 16 and the quarterfinals of the Champions Cup and Challenge Cup, which is pretty poor planning from him because that's quite a key weekend, possibly the best two rugby weekends of the year. And he's left me in the lurch yet again. So I am going to round up the rest of the action from the weekend, and then I'll do a Pro Day 2 kind of review and preview of the next round later in the week when I've got a bit more time, frankly. So we've touched on La Rochelle and Munster and Castres and Benetton. We've kind of briefly touched on Toulon and Saracens. I guess to kind of round off on that one, I think from my perspective, that's the best game I've seen Lewis Ludlam play for Toulon. I thought he looked really up for it. Some brilliant kind of turnover stuff, some work out wide. Yeah, just a lot more. He's been pretty involved. He's been pretty consistent for most of the season. But I thought he was just an extra level up in terms of physicality and the kind of key interventions on Saturday. Facundo Issa got man of the match, which was quite frankly remarkable if you watched only the first 20 minutes, because I think he seemed to have grease on his hands for the first half hour, because every time he touched the ball, he seemed to drop it.
he basically gave away 2 own tries, so a couple of contenders for own try of the season from just dropping it on his line, or rather not being able to handle it. And even in attack, he spilled a few. I think really the man of the match should probably have been Melvin Jaminet. I think we kind of previewed it last week and said that Marius Domon, it's kind of a bit of a shame that Jaminet has usurped him or re-usurped him because he's a really promising player. But Jaminet was just fantastic. He's showed his pace. He showed how big his boot is, how consistent his goal kicking is, especially like from everywhere on the pitch, and just generally like all of his kind of lines of running, his timing, his basic skills were absolutely fantastic. I think he basically made kind of one error in the whole game almost. Fainganuku and Ribbons were excellent again, kind of showing how good they've been to a wider audience, which is really cool. Certainly for Dave Ribbons, like getting himself in the shot window. There is an outside shot of the Lions there, I guess. There are a few people, certainly in the Times, they've kind of made noises about trying to get Dave Ribbons a spot on the Lions. He's certainly one of the form, well, I said last week, he's the form second row in the top 14, which makes him one of the form players in that position in Europe, basically, and therefore surely would thrust him into Lions contention. But has he got enough kind of international pedigree and credit in the bank to warrant the kind of late arrival that he probably will get with Toulon finishing in the top 4? It was a weird game because it was obviously wild, and we kind of touched on with Rich that it was actually some brilliant attacking play. The parallels with the Quins Bordeaux game from the quarterfinals last year felt ridiculous at one point. I think it was just the kind of pegging back just before half-time from Toulon and how they pulled away at the start of the second half, and that kind of the first half felt like it was just going to be a repeat of that Bordeaux Harlequins game from last year. But you kind of knew by half-time that Toulon were going to go on to win it, even though they hadn't been, well, they'd been second best in that first half. The bench was always going to tell because Saracens, as much as their rotated side has a load of international players and a load of quality still, there are a couple of really young lads, really callow players on the bench, whereas you looked at that Toulon bench and you had internationals everywhere. You know, you had Lucchese, who's been brilliant this season, Priso, who is arguably, well, for Toulon anyway, he's probably played more games, but he's, you know, right up there with Jean-Baptiste Gross in terms of his performances for Toulon. Gigashvili, absolute unit, brilliant scrummager. Big Brian Allen-Owisi, who was really, really physical and really kind of brought his skills to the game when he came on. And obviously you had Serran just lurking there as the trump card. You know, Ben White was pretty good, but I do still think that Serran is just a different level. There's just different skills and electricity with him on the pitch. So yeah, Toulon were fantastic once they kicked into gear. And we saw one of the most remarkable things we will ever see on a French rugby pitch. One of the most things that I never thought I would see, and that is a smile across the face of Pierre Mignoni. It threatened throughout the second half, and then it finally got there in about the final minute. We finally saw a smile on the touchline, still clutching the clipboard, obviously, but we did get that smile, which is something I never thought I'd see. Guess their opponents next weekend, Toulouse, the parachute man, absolutely amazing. Like getting stuck on a roof, trying to parachute in was fantastic. To be fair, when we were at Van a couple of weeks ago, the guy parachuted in the ball, and it was kind of like, is he missed the stadium? Is he coming back in? Like, is he going to land it? Is he going to land within the confines of the stadium? So it's obviously something they do in France, and French parachutists need a bit of work. I wasn't watching this live, but I kind of sent a panicked text to Rich on Sunday afternoon when it was, I think, probably 15-7 to Sale, of kind of, I'm not watching this. I've got no data, no signal, no battery, but Toulouse are losing. What on earth? And then eventually they clicked into gear. I think Miafu looked well up for it. And it's that kind of relentlessness that Sale could only live with them for one half, and it kind of felt inevitable, I guess. Relatively similar story in reverse for Saints at Clermont at Saints. They were really physical in that first 20 minutes. They just aren't very clinical, which really hampers them. For all their kind of forward dominance, they just can't quite get over the line quite a lot. They can have loads of territory, but yeah, and they play with loads of pace. There was that amazing tap tackle from Alex Mitchell, which was almost so good it almost looked like he hadn't even done it, because people generally thought Delguy had maybe tripped over his feet, but Ilta Daffith got, or I don't know if he was taking it off someone else, but I saw on Instagram a brilliant picture of just Mitchell just clutching the calf of Bautista Delguy. And the injuries really started to hamper them. They had some horrific luck with injuries. Fritz Lee, thankfully, has posted, he's smiling in hospital, still wearing a shirt, which is kind of quite terrifying, really. But ultimately, the pace of Northampton got the better of Claremont eventually. And one of the key players who, there was a little bit of a scuffle with Thomas Sate, Henry Pollock. That was kind of inevitable. You didn't even need to put money on that. But Pollock was brilliant again, X-Factor player. And I would like to remind everyone, very humbly, that I tipped him for a Lions bolter back in December. So, yeah, maybe, well, who knows? It might not even happen. But something to cling on to for me there. And Bordeaux v Ulster, they sent a pretty... It wasn't quite at full strength, which I think is remarkable. Don't know whether they were resting players or there's a few knocks there for some of their frontliners. But we've said a few times they've got such depth. They're kind of all about the same standard that it kind of doesn't really matter. Like, as much as Louis Bielbiere is obviously a class above, he's the kind of one that stood out. And Jalibert and Luku are obviously key, but kind of the forwards and the centres now, the way they play, it almost doesn't matter who's on the pitch. But a kind of fast, what a weekend of rugby that one was, and it sets up some pretty juicy ties next week. Leinster Glasgow is pretty cool. No involvement for us. Bordeaux hosting Munster. Can Munster back it up? Kind of feel like probably not. Castres, as we kind of talked about away at Northampton, that feels like a tough ask again for them. They just, away from home, have they got it in them? Toulon v Toulouse. Toulon with the home advantage at the Stade Mayol. What a fixture that is on Sunday afternoon. Let's hope it's sunshine again, because that is just tasty. Because we haven't seen yet Toulon play Toulouse with a full strength side. They kind of went away earlier on in the season with the Shags, basically. Whereas we haven't seen this iteration of Toulon with their kind of full noise team and clicking really, really well. We haven't seen that yet this season up against Toulouse. And also we haven't really seen it against Bordeaux. They kind of sent a slightly rotated side away to Bordeaux. So it'll be interesting kind of in the wider context of the top 14, which is obviously interesting for us. But yeah, what a belter that promises to be. And get in touch with us if you've got any thoughts on these games from last weekend. And yeah, so that's Champions Cup. Brilliant weekend. It wasn't just exclusive to Champions Cup where the Great Rugby was last weekend. And I will touch on the Challenge Cup in a bit. Okay, the Challenge Cup, and because it's just me in charge, that means I can dive into as much Po chat as I like. We indulge Richard with a lot of cast stuff, which, to be fair, was a belting game. But Po v Bath, it was more points again, some brilliant attacking rugby and loads of pace played from Bath. Really impressed with Donoghue, I'd never heard of at 10. He looks quite a player and quick for a fly half. It was a relatively, from a Po perspective, I think the stadium was basically half full. The fans clearly weren't that up for it. The side was what they've picked generally throughout the tournament, which has done pretty well, but it was a fairly insipid performance for the most part. The key focus was on Axel Desperez, who will be taking over the reins at 10 basically for the rest of the season, unless there's a really, really speedy recovery from Joe Simmons. How he plays is key, and I think he played pretty well. Like, there was some good stuff ball in hand. His kicking was pretty good, both at goal and from hand. Like, his range of kicking is good. He could have been helped out a bit by some of the chasing. That might have helped him a bit. But generally, he was decent. It's not kind of the season's over for Po because Joe Simmons is injured. But yeah, he maybe he'll benefit from having that period of time, knowing that he's the main man and having to build a side around him. He's clearly a talented player. albeit there was a moment where he kind of matched up against Archie Griffin, which genuinely looks like some sort of cruelty given the size mismatch. The one that stood out for me, as I said, it was a relatively insipid performance from Poe. There was a few key standouts in the forwards, and I think for me it made my mind up on, as a Poe fan, and hopefully it has for Picarones, is which of these guys are up for it, which of these guys are, should be invested in and should get more game time, and which ones shouldn't. I thought Carwyn Tuipulotu was brilliant, really busy, not always completely accurate, but just gets really, really physical, as we saw from him muscling his way over the line for his first Poe try, and involved, keen and energetic, whereas I think not everyone in that back row had that. And it was a shame that they brought Hewitt on for Tuipulotu, given that they were going to be, Hewitt was really energetic, and it was nice to see him come back, because obviously a little bit of issues off the field there. But it was I would have liked to have seen Hewitt come on for Hamanu, and maybe they were resting Carwyn. The game had probably gone by then, but quite like to see Carwyn Tuipulotu and Rhys Hewitt together. That would be some real fun stuff. But the man that was a class apart, young man, was Fabien Braubery, who we've spoken about on the podcast before, and we just saw what an exciting prospect he was, because he was absolutely brilliant. Was he brilliant? But he just got over the gain line a lot. He got yards after the contact and got his arms free and just made that slight. He was never stopped dead on the gain line. I think that's such a key skill. And to have that at 19 as an absolutely massive unit is really exciting for Poe and really exciting for France, I think. In terms of the rest of the Challenge Cup, not pretty disappointing round for the French sides generally. Lyon had a strong side out, and they got the win against a pretty weakened Sharks side. Sharks threw in the towel really with that selection. Will Lyon focus on that? It'll be interesting to see how they go away at Ospreys. It feels like they should target it. They won it a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago. Chance for another trophy for them. Bayonne, first defeat at home all season. It was a bit of a mix and match side. The Bulls went pretty much full noise. Bayonne, but they went pretty strong up front. It looked like a lot of their key players were kind of there or thereabouts. Maybe a couple of players missing in the front row in terms of them being rested. Abel Kufner played. Lucas Paulos was there. Lucas Martins, who's been brilliant as the kind of young hooker coming through, he was there. It was the backs that kind of lacked a bit of experience, and that perhaps showed. I mean, it's a side that they've been playing throughout this competition in terms, again, like Poe, kind of that slightly changed up side. But to have German and Tom Spring as your halfbacks, very good players, but that's clearly kind of not Rouet or Machinot, and it's not Lopez or Sagons, and neither of Lopez nor Sagons were on the bench, which I think kind of tells you all you need to know about how Bayonne were focusing on that. I think it's still a shock that they lost at home to the Bulls. The fact that they lost at home full stop is a bit of a shock, but yeah, I mean they've kind of now only, it was actually, given where they are in the league, it's probably quite a good opportunity for them to get a trophy or get a bit of a run, because it's now kind of all on the barrage, and can they get a home barrage, which it's currently looking like they might, and that obviously helps them, but you can't really see them being better than any of those top three at the moment. Montpellier was another shock to lose at home to Gloucester, and Gloucester actually won that relatively comfortable. Gloucester had a really good team out. They went full noise. Montpellier were pretty much full noise. There's a very, very strong pack, apart from the debutant Ungakuru in the second row, but the back row of Nucci, Simmons and Vunipola is basically what we would have for the first choice back row. It was pretty much the first choice front row as well. I guess it's just, what are we looking at in terms of the halfbacks now? Like Hugo Royce, bit of a missed opportunity for him. Do Montpellier need to have Hogg at 10 for them to win any games? It feels like that. The kind of transformation of Stuart Hogg is kind of bizarre, really. But you'd expect that Montpellier team to have done a little bit better, as good as Gloucester have been this year, and the pedigree that Gloucester have in this competition, albeit Montpellier also have that. Racing v USAP, well, Racing seemed to be very good away from home all of a sudden. Pretty good win for them. They do go away next weekend to Connacht, which is a pretty tough prospect, because Connacht have been really good in this tournament despite some pretty average home form. But again, in terms of the sides, interesting one from USAP. It was pretty much a first choice backline, very similar to the one that we saw against Van, except for a couple of injuries. Tommy Allen came in for Delpy, which kind of makes sense. Are they trying to build some cohesion, trying to build on that exciting display from Van? It perhaps feels like that because it wasn't the first choice pack. And how do you know that? Well, there was no Oviedo. He is their key man. Brooks is now one of their key men. You know, if he's playing, that's kind of them going at it. And I'd say Ruiz and Berrier, I know Berrier was on the bench, but Ruiz and Berrier, that front row of Brooks, Ruiz and Berrier, that's their first choice. It is brilliant, and perhaps they were giving them a bit of a rest. That said, I mean, it was bizarre. I don't quite know what was going on with the Racing selection of Habosi in the centres and Fico on the wing, but all things considered, pretty good win. Slightly rotated side. They rotated their main man at 10, Dan Lancaster, brought in that kind of backup English fly half, Owen Farrell, who seemed to do a pretty good job. But yeah, it's kind of a weird one, the Challenge Cup. I really expected more from the French sides generally. Little bit disappointed from them. And Lyon, I would say, Lyon and Racing still the kind of remaining sides in it. They do go away next weekend, but they should really have too much quality for those sides. Lyon going away to Ospreys. If Lyon go full noise again, there is too much quality for them to lose to Ospreys. Similarly, Connacht, obviously a tough place to go. Very, very different to La Défense. Maybe that suits Racing, but if Racing go with their full strength side, which they may well do, they're kind of things are picking up. They may back themselves to get clear of relegation and this could be a way back into the Champions Cup, which doesn't seem like they're going to get any other way. So they might try and focus on this as well. It'd be nice to see both sides focus on the Challenge Cup now and try and kind of give the top 14 the kind of validate and justify the kind of reputation that top 14 has. But yeah, quarterfinals are going to be brilliant. They're on Saturday, both those French sides, 5:30, the Lyon game, and 8 o'clock, the Racing game. Thank you for bearing with me without Richard. Hopefully that's kind of kept you up to date and kept you kind of abreast, and those are my thoughts. Please get back in touch with us and give us your thoughts. As I said, I'll be back for a kind of special Pro Day 2 review, preview later in the week, and I'll try and slide in some transfer news and PT4s type stuff within that. But until then, and enjoy the rest of the week. I hope you're getting excited for another carnival of European rugby like we had last weekend. Let's hope we get the same again, even in the quarterfinals. It is my favourite weekend of the rugby calendar. There's just certainly in the Champions Cup, 4 games of real quality, teams going properly at it, great atmospheres. Yeah, let's enjoy that. But until then, au revoir.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
This weekend, only at Macy's, it's our lowest prices of spring. How low? Diamond rings, pendants, and earrings, only $399, originally $1,500. Ninja blenders, now $89.99. And $395 men's designer suits, only $99.99. So if you're wondering why you should shop Macy's lowest prices sale, well, the name pretty much says it all. It's our lowest prices for one weekend only. Starts tomorrow at Macy's. Savings off already reduced prices. Exclusions apply.